I remember the day Lena first appeared as if it were a scene from a movie, a moment that promised a fresh start for someone who had known nothing but emptiness. Invited into our tight-knit family circle as a surrogate daughter, Lena arrived with an air of mystery and hope. With no family of her own to anchor her, she was welcomed with open arms, and for a while she fit in perfectly. Her gentle smile, soft-spoken words, and sincere eyes captivated us all. It seemed that her lack of a familial background had imbued her with a unique vulnerability and kindness, making her a symbol of resilience that our family desperately needed. At first, every interaction with Lena felt like a breath of fresh air. Her warm presence enriched our gatherings, and her genuine interest in our lives made each of us feel special. I watched as she laughed lightly at our jokes, listened attentively during our conversations, and subtly became the unifying thread in our collective story. It was as if she'd been woven into our lives by fate, filling a void that we hadn't even realized existed. Yet, as time passed, the delicate balance of her charm began to shift in unforeseen ways. That same captivating warmth slowly morphed into an overwhelming intensity. I started noticing how her need for inclusion turned into a relentless pursuit of the spotlight, overshadowing the natural flow of our interactions. Her laughter, once a soothing melody, now often carried a piercing insistence that disrupted our quiet moments. It became evident that beneath the layers of gratitude and vulnerability lay a personality craving more than mere acceptance. It was demanding constant validation. This transformation was as dramatic as it was unsettling. The Lena we once admired for her soft grace was unveiling facets of herself that hinted at inner turmoil and an almost desperate desire to belong. Little did we know then that this evolution would mark the beginning of a turbulent chapter in our family's story, one filled with emotional upheavals and conflicts that would test the very bonds we held dear. I remember how our family gatherings, once warm and filled with gentle laughter, began to change ever since Lena's transformation. In the beginning, she had been our cherished, vulnerable addition, a ray of light that filled the gaps left by her absent past. But as the months went by, that delicate charm gave way to an unsettling intensity. It seemed that with every meeting, Lena's behavior grew bolder, and her need for attention morphed into an intrusive compulsion that disrupted our most intimate moments. At our weekly family dinners, what used to be quiet conversations among siblings and cousins turned into tense battlegrounds for control. I would be sharing a personal story with my mother, feeling the comfort of her gentle nods and knowing smiles, only to see Lena glide into our conversation like a force of nature. Her laughter, once soothing, now resonated with an edge of insincerity as she interjected with her own anecdotes, derailing the delicate balance we had so carefully nurtured. It was as if she craved not just inclusion, but dominance, demanding that every whisper, every secret glance belonged to her realm. The transformation was gradual yet alarming. I vividly recall one particular evening when my cousin and I were discussing a personal challenge we had both faced. The room was filled with an unspoken understanding, a shared space where our vulnerabilities were safe. Out of nowhere, Lena interrupted with a loud, insistent comment that not only derailed our conversation, but also exposed details that we had meant to keep between ourselves. The sudden shift in tone left us reeling, and the atmosphere in the room grew heavy with tension. Her interjections, delivered with an almost desperate need to be the center of attention, made it clear that she was no longer content to remain a peripheral participant in our lives. With every family event, the situation escalated. I began to notice that Lena would linger by side conversations, her eyes fixed on our private exchanges, as if waiting for an opportunity to seize the moment. Even during quiet moments when I thought I had found solace in the presence of those I loved, her presence loomed large, undermining our intimacy and replacing it with a feeling of constant surveillance. It wasn't just the interruption of conversation. It was the invasion of our personal space. Lena's behavior became a relentless intrusion, a subtle, yet powerful assertion that she was entitled to every part of our lives, no matter how private or sacred those moments were. This dramatic shift not only unsettled me, but also began to erode the warmth that once defined our gatherings. The joyful, carefree chatter was slowly replaced by a palpable tension, As family members exchanged wary glances and hushed remarks, the once safe haven of our shared stories had transformed into a stage for Lena's relentless performance, a performance that, instead of uniting us, gradually drove a wedge between our hearts. In those moments, I couldn't help but feel that our family's true spirit was being choked by her unyielding need to control every conversation, every silent pause, every moment that was meant to be shared in trust and love. The engagement announcement was meant to be a tender, intimate moment, a rare instance where my brother and I could share our joy away from the usual turbulence. I still remember the soft glow of the evening, the quiet hum of our surroundings, and the deep sincerity in my brother's voice as he revealed his plans to get married. It was a moment that, for a fleeting second, promised to mend the fractures that had slowly emerged within our family. A moment of unadulterated happiness that contrasted sharply with the chaos Lena had gradually introduced into our lives. However, as my brother leaned in to share the heartfelt details, Lena, with her characteristic unpredictability, burst into the scene. Without any warning, she interjected with a string of complaints that shattered the fragile serenity. Her unexpected interruption was like a sudden, violent gust of wind that swept away the delicate petals of our shared joy. Instead of allowing us to savor the emotional intimacy of the moment, she redirected the focus entirely on herself, demanding attention with an intensity that bordered on the desperate. Her voice, laden with discontent, cut through the air, transforming what was meant to be a cherished memory into a battleground of conflicting emotions. The warmth and genuine excitement that had once enveloped us were instantly replaced by an undercurrent of tension and disbelief. I watched in dismay as my brother's smile faltered, the light in his eyes dimming in response to Lena's abrasive interjection. It was as if the room, once filled with hope and love, had suddenly been encased in a stifling cloud of discontent and discord. That defining moment laid bare the profound impact of Lena's behavior on our family dynamics. It was not merely a disruption, it was a stark manifestation of the constant intrusion that had been eroding our intimate connections. In that split second, the sanctity of a personal celebration was violated, leaving behind an indelible mark of conflict and sorrow. The memory of that day continues to echo in my heart, a poignant reminder of how a single moment, twisted by uninvited interference, can unravel the fabric of familial joy. Every family gathering that once brimmed with warmth and shared joy had gradually turned into a tense arena of unresolved conflicts, all because of Lena's relentless intrusions. She began by forcefully inserting herself into every family activity, whether it was joining us for wedding dress fittings or insisting on being part of our intimate birthday brunches. Her presence was never subtle. She made it her mission to blur the lines between our cherished privacy and public celebration, using sharp, cutting remarks that unsettled everyone. I still remember one particular brunch on a crisp winter morning when the light-hearted banter among relatives was abruptly hijacked by Lena's defiant interjections. As laughter filled the room moments before, her biting comments sliced through the jovial atmosphere, leaving a bitter silence in its wake. It wasn't merely that she wanted to participate, she demanded to dominate every conversation and event, as if our personal moments were hers by right. This brazen behavior was especially painful for me, already reeling from the recent loss of Rita and the crushing responsibilities that had come with caring for her. Amid the lingering grief and the heavy burden of duty, Lena's overbearing need for attention felt like a cruel, jarring reminder that our family bonds were being tested. Relatives exchanged worried glances as her actions repeatedly violated the unspoken rules of intimacy we had long maintained, transforming our safe haven of shared memories into a battlefield of emotions. The room's energy shifted unpredictably from warm and welcoming to fraught with anxiety and tension, each time Lena stepped into the circle. Every forced laugh, every awkward pause, seemed to echo the growing dissonance between our desire for closeness and the invasive nature of her participation. Her insistence not only disrupted our collective peace, but also highlighted the stark contrast between the loving unity we once enjoyed and the fragile state of our current relationships. In that moment, the sanctity of our family gatherings was forever marred, leaving behind a palpable sense of discomfort and an ever-deepening worry that our shared moments might never again be free from conflict and unwelcome intrusion. Balancing the pressures of personal responsibility and the crushing weight of loss has become the harsh reality of my life. As I struggled to manage my dual roles working as a personal nurse for Rita and pursuing my studies, I found myself trapped in an emotional storm that showed no mercy. Rita wasn't just a patient. She had become like a third grandmother to me, a pillar of wisdom and unconditional love in our family. Her gentle presence provided solace amid the chaos Lena's intrusions had stirred up. Yet, even her warmth couldn't shield us from the inevitable tragedies that life sometimes delivers. One fateful day, as I was juggling my duties between a critical study session and caring for Rita, disaster struck. Rita suffered a severe fall in the bathtub, a moment that unfolded in a heartbeat but left behind irreversible scars. I watched in helpless agony as her health deteriorated rapidly. The vibrant woman who had nurtured me now confined to the slow, painful decline that followed the accident. Every moment I spent by her bedside was fraught with a desperate hope that tomorrow might bring a miracle. Yet deep down, I felt the looming shadow of inevitable loss. The juxtaposition of caring for Rita while enduring Lena's constant meddling in family matters only amplified the emotional strain. Her insistent need for attention during our most vulnerable moments made it all the more difficult to focus on the gravity of Rita's condition. The final blow came when, after months of battling the decline, Rita passed away, leaving a void in our lives that no amount of family gathering or heartfelt conversation could ever fill. Her departure not only stripped away a beloved guardian, but also intensified the chaos that Lena had been nurturing in our family dynamics. The relentless pressure of balancing work, education, and grief became almost unbearable. In that suffocating moment of loss, I realized that the tragedy was twofold. Not only had I lost the woman who had been my guiding light, but I also lost a part of myself, my hope and stability, amid the overwhelming responsibility and unyielding sorrow. The day of Rita's final farewell was charged with an unbearable mix of sorrow and tension that no one could have foreseen. We had decided with heavy hearts to honor Rita's lifelong wish by scattering her ashes at her childhood home, a sacred place filled with memories of love and resilience. This choice, meant to be a tender tribute to the woman who had been like a grandmother to me, quickly turned into a dramatic battleground of conflicting loyalties and raw emotions. As our family gathered at that hallowed ground, the air was thick with grief and reverence. Every whisper, every tear spoke volumes of the deep void left by Rita's passing. Amid this quiet mourning, Lena's unexpected intervention shattered the solemnity of the moment. Out of nowhere, she began to voice her objections, arguing vehemently that we should postpone this heartfelt tribute in favor of preparing for the upcoming wedding. Her words, laced with an insidious mix of self-interest and disregard for our collective pain, sparked an explosive confrontation that pitted loyalty to the dearly departed against her relentless drive for attention. In that heart-wrenching instant, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The sacred silence was replaced by heated voices and clashing ideals. My heart pounded as I struggled to reconcile the immense respect I had for Rita with the stark and sensitive priorities Lena imposed. It felt as if the very ground beneath our feet trembled under the weight of this classic collision between cherished memories and an unyielding need to control the narrative. Every family member's face told a story of anguish and disbelief, their eyes pleading for the sanctity of our loss to be acknowledged. The intense confrontation forced us all to confront a bitter truth. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface for months was now reaching a boiling point. Lena's audacity in this most delicate moment not only disrespected Rita's memory, but also threatened to fracture the fragile unity that remained within our family. As the debate raged on, I could only watch, overwhelmed by sorrow and anger, as this defining moment underscored the painful reality that sometimes, even in our deepest grief, discord finds a way to intrude. No matter how many times we tried to set boundaries, Lena refused to acknowledge them. Every firm but polite attempt to establish space was met with defiance, subtle mockery, or outright dismissal. What began as uncomfortable intrusions escalated into something far more insidious, an unrelenting campaign of passive-aggressive jabs and veiled insults that left deep emotional wounds in their wake. It was as if she thrived on pushing limits, testing just how much we would endure before breaking. At family gatherings, her words became weapons. She had mastered the art of disguising cruelty as humor, throwing out biting remarks under the pretense of harmless teasing. "Oh, you've always been a little too sensitive, haven't you?" she would say with a smirk whenever I or anyone else dared to challenge her behavior. When my brother's fiancée shared her excitement about wedding plans, Lena scoffed, muttering just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Must be nice to have people actually care about your big day." It was an unmistakable jab at my family's devotion to Rita's passing, a moment of pettiness so sharp it left the room in stunned silence. Each time we confronted her, she turned it around, playing the victim, claiming she was being unfairly targeted, that we were excluding her, ganging up on her. It was maddening. Every moment spent in her presence felt like walking on eggshells, never knowing when she would strike next. What made it worse was that her presence had begun to erode the once unshakable foundation of our family. Tensions flared more frequently. Private conversations became whispers behind closed doors, and the warmth that once defined our gatherings slowly dimmed under the weight of her manipulations. It wasn't just about discomfort anymore, it was about survival. How long could we continue pretending everything was fine when Lena made it her mission to chip away at our peace? It was becoming painfully clear, if something didn't change soon, there wouldn't be a family left to save. The weight of everything had finally settled onto my shoulders. Rita's passing had left a hollow ache in my chest, a grief that still felt raw, unbearable. And yet, there was no space to mourn, no moment of peace to process my loss, because Lena refused to let anything, not even death, exist outside of her orbit. The tension within the family had reached its breaking point. Every gathering turned into a battlefield, every conversation laced with the threat of another confrontation. The worst part? My brother, the one person I had always believed would stand by me, seemed oblivious or worse, unwilling to acknowledge the destruction Lena was causing. It wasn't that he didn't see it. He just didn't want to. Love had made him blind, and I could feel myself slowly slipping from his grasp, pushed out by the woman he had chosen. Then came the unbearable decision, one that I had avoided facing for so long. The wedding was approaching, an event that should have been a moment of celebration, a time for joy. But the thought of standing there, of watching Lena weave herself deeper into my family while I felt like an outsider in my own home, made my stomach churn. The idea of enduring another day of her subtle cruelty, her invasive presence, was almost too much to bear. For the first time, I considered not going. Skipping my own brother's wedding. The thought was agonizing, but what was the alternative? To stand there and pretend. To subject myself to yet another day of biting remarks and veiled insults, knowing no one would stop her? And if I walked away from the wedding, would I walk away for good? Could I sever ties not just with Lena, but with my brother too? The very idea was unthinkable. But so was continuing to endure this torment. I wasn't sure which choice would hurt more. But I knew one thing: no matter what I decided, something between us would break, and this time, there would be no fixing it. The family was unraveling, thread by thread, under the weight of Lena's presence. What had once been a close-knit bond was now strained by whispered arguments, tense glances, and conversations that felt like walking through a minefield. My brother, blinded by love or perhaps sheer denial, refused to acknowledge the damage Lena had inflicted. To him, she was misunderstood, unfairly judged. To the rest of us, she was the force that had driven a wedge between us all, turning warmth into wariness, laughter into caution. My mother, always the peacemaker, tried to reason with him, her voice laced with frustration and sadness. "Can't you see what she's doing?" she pleaded one evening, her hands gripping the edges of the dining table as if steadying herself against the inevitable. "She's isolating you from us, from the family." My father, usually a man of few words, was less restrained. "She doesn't respect us," he said coldly. "She doesn't respect you." Even my other siblings, once indifferent to the growing tensions, had begun to express their unease. One by one, they shared stories, moments of discomfort, instances where Lena had overstepped, words she had twisted, boundaries she had ignored. It was undeniable. But my brother wouldn't hear it. "You're all just looking for reasons to hate her," he snapped. "You never gave her a chance." That was the moment I realized no matter how much he loved us, no matter how much history we shared, he had already chosen. The discussions turned into debates, debates into arguments. Each gathering became a battleground between those trying to hold on to the family they once knew, and those exhausted from constantly defending themselves. At what point did tolerance become submission? When did standing up for ourselves turn into cruelty? No one had an answer. And in the absence of resolution, the fractures deepened, leaving us all teetering on the edge of something none of us knew how to fix. The tension in the family had reached a breaking point. Every effort to set boundaries with Lena had been met with resistance, manipulation, or outright dismissal. No amount of reasoning, pleading, or confrontation had managed to shake her self-righteous belief that she belonged at the center of everything. And as the days passed, it became painfully clear she had no intention of changing. I was exhausted. The weight of Rita's passing still clung to me like a heavy fog, and the constant battles within my own family drained whatever strength I had left. The funeral had been a moment of both closure and sorrow, a final act of love for the woman who had once been my anchor. Surrounded by those who truly cared, I laid her to rest, whispering a promise to carry on, even if I felt lost. But the moment of peace was fleeting. Even in grief, Lena found a way to make herself the center of attention. She had scoffed at the idea of prioritizing Rita's burial over the joyous occasion of the upcoming wedding, her indifference cutting deeper than any of her previous insults. My brother, standing beside her, had remained silent. That silence hurt more than anything. I had tried. I had fought for my family, for the bond we once had. But now I was beginning to accept the truth. I couldn't save someone who refused to see the danger they were in. My brother was walking toward disaster, and nothing I said would make him stop. So, for the first time in my life, I chose to let go. I withdrew not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. I needed time to heal, to breathe, to exist without the constant burden of trying to fix what was broken. The rest of my family, too, had begun to pull away, weary from the endless conflict. And yet, even in the midst of this sadness, I held on to a fragile thread of hope. Hope that one day my brother would see the truth. Hope that, when that day came, he would still have a family to return to. Hope that, despite everything, love could endure, even if for now it had to be loved from a distance.